4 months, it was just a whisper. A murmur in the shadows of locker rooms, among jaded insiders and speculative fans. What if Dean comes back? But no one really believed it, not after everything. Not after Jon Moxley torched every bridge, every contract clause, and every unspoken code on his way out the door. Not after he bled on the indies, roared in AEW, and carved his legacy away from the corporate machine. But on a night no one saw coming, in the middle of a seemingly standard episode of Friday Night Smackdown, the impossible happened. Dean Ambrose walked back into WWE. And the first thing he did was drive his elbow straight through the heart of the Shield. The cameras were rolling, the arena lights blazing. Seth Rollins stood in the ring, mic in hand, throwing jabs at Roman Reigns, taunting the absent tribal chief while basking in the momentum of his Money in the Bank alliance. Paul Heyman stood smugly in the corner, Bronson Reed and Braun Breaker flanking him like twin executioners. Then the lights dipped. Not a full blackout. Not Undertaker style. Just a flicker. Enough to cause confusion. Enough to buy a second. And in that second, chaos from the crowd, a hooded figure leapt the barricade, slid under the ropes, and moved with a savage precision that was too familiar to ignore. Before security even processed what was happening, the man was behind Seth Rollins, and then he struck. A boot to the gut. A brutal Dirty Deeds DDT. No theatrics. No stare down. No dramatic pause for crowd reaction. Just violence. Quick. Surgical. And in that moment, every fan watching knew, Dean Ambrose was back. But here's the twist. This wasn't a WWE return the company had paraded in advance. There was no teaser campaign, no cryptic vignettes, no theme song refresh. Just raw shock. The kind that makes you question whether what you're seeing is even part of the script. Because according to multiple backstage sources, this wasn't the return WWE creative originally planned. If reports are to be believed, Ambrose's return was orchestrated in near total secrecy, involving only a handful of key people, TripleH, a select group of agents, and Ambrose himself. Even Heyman was reportedly left in the dark. The segment cut to black almost immediately after the attack. No follow-up. No commentary recap. The SmackDown broadcast ended in stunned silence. And within minutes, Twitter exploded. Dean Ambrose is back. Moxley just attacked Rollins on live TV. What is happening? Behind the scenes, pandemonium unfolded. Wrestlers scrambled in the gorilla position, security reviewed access footage, and certain executives reportedly panicked, unsure whether this was a work or a hijack. And maybe that was the point. Dean Ambrose didn't just return. He declared war on Seth Rollins, on the WWE system that failed him, and on the Shield legacy itself. But to understand why that moment landed like a bombshell, you have to go back. You have to rewind years, to the moment when Jon Moxley left WWE and left behind Dean Ambrose forever. In 2019, he walked away from millions, from main events, from guaranteed WrestleMania slots. He wasn't just frustrated, he was disgusted. Disgusted by what WWE had turned his character into. The gas mask. The stinky fan promos. The creative death spiral. He gave interviews describing the suffocation he felt. The loss of identity. The corporate puppeteering that strangled his soul as an artist. And when he debuted at AEW's Double or Nothing, he looked like a man reborn. So what could possibly bring him back? Money? Maybe. But not likely. Not for Moxley. Not for the man who once told Jericho he'd rather wrestle in bingo halls than read another one of Vince's scripts. For Moxley, Ambrose, it had to be personal. And that brings us to Seth Rollins, because Seth has changed too. No longer the plucky babyface architect. No longer the Shield's golden child. He's evolved into a chaos king, a manipulator draped in arrogance and neon. Over the past year, he's laughed at Roman Reigns' collapse, allied himself with Paul Heyman, and positioned himself as the future tribal messiah of WWE. And maybe that was the final straw. Maybe watching Seth mock the bloodline while aligning with the very man who exploited Roman pushed Ambrose over the edge. Insiders say there were quiet negotiations between WWE and Moxley beginning in late April. Not with AEW management. Not with Tony Khan. But through back channels, calls to Renee Paquette, inquiries through intermediaries. WWE knew Ambrose couldn't be bought. But they also knew he had unfinished business. The betrayal he left unresolved. The brotherhood he abandoned. The narrative he never got to close. And what better way to finish that story than by turning on the man who replaced loyalty with ego? The idea was pitched. A silent return. No marketing. No fanfare. A real invasion, something gritty, something Moxley. But there was one condition. He wanted to come back his way. Not in trunks. Not in Shield gear. Not as a sanitized version of who he used to be. And not as Jon Moxley either. He would return as Dean Ambrose, but it would be a shell, scarred, unfiltered, dangerous. A ghost of what WWE lost, and so, this return wasn't a celebration. It was a message. A warning. A strike at the heart of WWE's most carefully protected narrative, that the Shield was ever unbreakable. Because what if the brotherhood never healed? What if behind the curtain, resentment festered and brotherhood rotted into rivalry? In the aftermath of Smackdown, sources say Seth Rollins was furious. Not in character. Not on screen. But backstage. The attack was reportedly not disclosed to him in full detail beforehand. He expected an angle. Maybe a stare down. Not a full-on DDT in the center of the ring with no cue, no warning, and no scripted follow-up. Seth's promo had been approved earlier that day. The lines about Roman. The shade thrown at AEW. The subtle digs at Moxley. He thought they were just words, but words have consequences. And for Dean Ambrose, that consequence came in the form of a silent drive to the arena, a brief nod to the production truck, and a calculated re-entry into the world that once chewed him up and spit him out. What happens next? That's the question burning through every corridor in WWE right now. Is this a one-off? Is Ambrose back full-time? Will AEW retaliate? Is Tony Khan aware? Some insiders claim this is a short-term deal. A 6-month run culminating in a high-profile program with Rollins, possibly at Survivor Series or WrestleMania. Others say it's a test balloon. If the crowd response is strong, if the creative feels right, Ambrose could be offered a groundbreaking dual promotion contract. But others are less optimistic. One former producer told us, "You don't bring Ambrose back unless you're ready to burn something down." And maybe that's exactly what WWE is doing. Burning down the past. Burning down the myth of the indestructible Shield. Because there's one truth that remains unspoken in WWE circles: every brotherhood eventually ends in betrayal, and in the ashes of that betrayal, a new war is rising. Paul Heyman, reportedly blindsided by Ambrose's return, is now said to be orchestrating a countermove, possibly aligning Bronson Reed or Breakker to deliver a retaliatory strike. Rollins, for his part, has gone dark on social media. No tweets. No comments. No interviews. Just silence. The same kind of silence Ambrose kept for years, but there's something else. Something that no one wants to talk about. During the live broadcast, right before the attack, there was a brief moment, maybe less than 2 seconds, where the camera cut to Roman Reigns backstage. He wasn't scheduled to appear. He said nothing. He looked directly into the lens. And then the screen cut out. Was it a glitch? A mistake? Or was it Roman watching it all unfold, and smiling? Because if Dean Ambrose is back, the Shield is no longer broken. It's at war, and we've only just seen the opening shot backstage. Within seconds of Smackdown going off the air, producers scrambled to regain control. Phones rang. Statements were drafted and scrapped. Wrestlers watched the replay in stunned silence. And in the eye of the storm, Seth Rollins was said to be pacing furiously, asking the same question over and over again: who greenlit this? The answer wasn't clear. Because this wasn't part of any publicly distributed run sheet. In fact, most of the production crew didn't even have a cue for the Ambrose appearance. Security wasn't briefed. The announce team had no script for a return. And when fans flooded social media with replays and screenshots, it became apparent that even the cameramen didn't have the usual guidance. One shaky angle caught Ambrose's face mid-attack. Another lingered just a second too long on Rollins writhing in shock. It wasn't polished. It wasn't clean. It was chaos, and that's what made it real. That's what made it Ambrose. TripleH, according to backstage insiders, was the only top-level executive who signed off on the return. He reportedly kept it quiet, on purpose. Only 3 agents were involved in coordinating the entrance and timing. Even members of the creative team weren't told. Why? Because, in the words of one insider, Hunter wanted to test how WWE reacts when the walls shake. And shake they did. Fans erupted online. Within an hour, Dean Ambrose was trending worldwide. Not Jon Moxley. Not Mox. Dean Ambrose. The persona he swore he'd buried. The name he discarded. And yet here he was, resurrected. The lunatic fringe. The madman. The betrayer and the betrayed. But was this really Ambrose returning? Or was this Moxley, weaponized? One WWE insider claims that behind closed doors, the deal was structured unlike any in recent memory. Not a full-time contract. Not even a classic Legends deal. More like a storyline license. WWE, reportedly, negotiated rights to use the Dean Ambrose name and persona under a limited narrative agreement, giving Moxley freedom to appear, attack, and disappear at will over a 6-month arc. Sources close to AEW say Tony Khan wasn't happy. Moxley, still under AEW contract, is believed to have creative freedom written into his deal, but not cross-promotional freedom. If that's true, then this Smackdown return could be a breach. But others suggest something deeper. Something more coordinated, because what if this wasn't a war between companies? What if this was the beginning of a new era? There have been whispers, rumors long buried beneath layers of denials and closed-door meetings, that WWE and AEW have, in recent months, explored quiet collaboration. The rise of global streaming platforms. The mutual threat of UFC crossovers. The rapid fan burnout from oversaturated content. Both companies face the same existential question: how do you keep fans watching? The answer: shock them. Together, and nothing could be more shocking than a man like Jon Moxley stepping back into WWE rings, not as a traitor, but as a free agent of chaos. But even if this was coordinated behind the scenes, the characters inside the ring don't care about diplomacy. Seth Rollins now finds himself publicly humiliated. Attacked by the man he once called his brother. The same man he turned his back on years ago. The same man he once cradled in celebration when they captured the tag team championships. The Shield wasn't just a faction. It was a revolution. A family. A dynasty. Now, that dynasty is bleeding. And Roman Reigns? He remains silent. No tweets. No statements. No backstage appearances. But that 1-second glimpse during the broadcast, his eyes watching from the locker room, spoke louder than any promo. Because if Dean Ambrose is back, then Roman knows what's coming. This isn't about the bloodline anymore. This is about unfinished business. The Shield was built on trust. On a brotherhood forged in war. But betrayal lives in the bones of this story. Seth betrayed Roman at Money in the Bank 2025, aligning with Heyman, attacking the bloodline, laughing as Roman collapsed backstage. Now, Roman's enemies have become Ambrose's prey. Some fans believe Ambrose's return is the start of a new faction. A dangerous rogue unit formed not out of alliance, but revenge. Dean Ambrose, the lone wolf. Roman Reigns, the fallen chief. JUSO, humiliated and cast out. All 3 betrayed by Rollins in one way or another. Could they unite, not as the Shield, but as something far more sinister? One producer reportedly floated the name The Reckoning. A group not defined by loyalty or shared values, but by one common goal: destroy Seth Rollins. But others warn this is a trap. Ambrose is not a savior. He's a wild card. He doesn't lead. He doesn't follow. He explodes. And he walks away before the fire burns out. What if Ambrose's return isn't about Roman or the Shield? What if this is personal? There are whispers, unconfirmed but persistent, that Rollins played a role in blocking Ambrose's previous WWE return. In 2023, when Triple H was rebuilding WWE post-Vince, there were early talks of surprise Royal Rumble entrants. Ambrose's name came up. But reportedly, someone close to creative vetoed the idea. That someone? Seth Rollins. Was it fear? Ego? Jealousy? Or did Rollins simply believe that Ambrose didn't belong anymore? Now, it's Ambrose who's rewriting that story, with fists, not words. Meanwhile, AEW fans are torn. Some feel betrayed. Others are ecstatic. One viral post put it best: Mox didn't jump ship. He lit it on fire and walked across the smoke. Because Ambrose didn't announce his return. He didn't cut a promo. He didn't sign a contract in public. He just showed up. Hurt Seth. And vanished, and that's what makes him terrifying, because you can't feud with a ghost. You can't cut a promo against silence. You can't prepare for a man who thrives in the unplanned. For the first time in years, Seth Rollins isn't in control. He's not laughing. He's not dancing. He's watching his back, and wondering when Dean Ambrose will strike again. Reports say the next confrontation is planned for WWE Payback. But even that might not go as scheduled. Because with Ambrose back in the game, plans don't matter. Schedules don't matter. Control is dead. The Shield is no longer a team. It's a battlefield, and in the center of that battlefield stands a man who's not here to win titles. He's here to settle scores, and he just started with Seth Rollins. But now, as the dust settles, all eyes are turning to the one man who has said nothing, yet has the most to lose: Roman Reigns. He hasn't tweeted. He hasn't been spotted at the Performance Center. He didn't appear at Raw. And while the locker room is buzzing with fallout, Roman has maintained a silence so loud, it's become deafening. But make no mistake, Roman is watching. Roman is waiting. And if sources close to WWE creative are to be believed, Roman Reigns is about to make a move that could shift the balance of power in WWE forever, because this isn't just about Ambrose attacking Rollins. This is about the implosion of every alliance that once kept WWE's foundation intact. The Shield represented more than dominance, it represented balance. Ambrose was the chaos. Rollins was the architect. Roman was the anchor. But the anchor has been unmoored. The architect has gone rogue. And the chaos? He's returned with vengeance in his veins. Backstage producers say Roman was originally scheduled to return at SummerSlam, in a bloodline continuation angle. But after Ambrose's unannounced return, everything changed. Now, the talk is that Roman will return before SummerSlam, in fact, possibly as early as next week's Smackdown. And not to align with either man, but to confront both, because here's the twist no one saw coming: Roman Reigns versus Dean Ambrose versus Seth Rollins, at Survivor Series. Not in a match. Not in a feud. But in a full-blown narrative war that stretches over 5 months and culminates in the destruction of the past to make room for WWE's future. That's what Triple H wants. That's what Paul Heyman is terrified of, and if reports are accurate, the company is laying the groundwork for an arc that fans have been begging for, but that creative was too afraid to execute: a full Shield Civil War. No alliances. No reunions. No nostalgia. Just pain, betrayal, and redemption, one match, one promo, one mind game at a time. But where does Ambrose fit in all this? According to one senior writer, Ambrose isn't here to be a babyface or a heel. He's here to burn the script. And that's exactly what he's doing. Already, WWE's carefully crafted calendar of feuds has been thrown into disarray. CM Punk was supposed to feud with Rollins post-SummerSlam. Cody Rhodes was scheduled to begin a run with Solo Sikoa. Now, with Ambrose's return, all of that is on hold. The fans have spoken. The narrative has shifted, and it's not just fans reacting. Wrestlers are watching too. Inside sources say Jey Uso reached out directly to Triple H about possibly being included in the Shield storyline, suggesting a subplot involving betrayal and brotherhood that could deepen the narrative. Others, like Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn, are pitching ideas for their characters to align or clash with this emerging war, but no one, not even Heyman, knows what Ambrose will do next because he's not answering calls. He's not attending rehearsals. He shows up when he wants. Leaves without speaking. Keeps his locker room door closed. Some say he only communicates through one person, Triple H. And even then, it's brief. He's a ghost walking through WWE corridors, and ghosts don't need scripts. Meanwhile, AEW is scrambling. A quiet internal investigation has reportedly begun to determine whether Moxley violated any exclusivity clauses. Some execs are furious. Others believe Tony Khan secretly approved the move to test AEW's flexibility in the new wrestling era. Either way, AEW is feeling the pressure. Fan sentiment is split. Some are chanting traitor. Others are demanding Moxley's return on Dynamite this week to explain himself, but if he doesn't show, then the message is clear: Moxley is gone. Dean Ambrose is back, and with that return comes a reckoning that even the bloodline wasn't prepared for, because here's what few realize: this might not be Ambrose's final war, this might be the first move in something much bigger. Something orchestrated. In the past week, multiple Easter eggs have surfaced that point to a disturbing possibility that Dean Ambrose may not be alone. At Backlash 2025, a mystery figure was seen watching from the catwalk during Seth Rollins' entrance. The camera cut away too quickly. But some fans believe they spotted a silhouette wearing Shield gear. At Raw last month, a production mic captured a whisper from off-camera: "3 can destroy more than 1 ever could." Is it a stretch? Maybe. Or maybe it's a warning, because what if Ambrose isn't just here to attack Rollins? What if he's here to rebuild the Shield in his image, not as brothers, not as heroes, but as a machine of vengeance, reborn from betrayal? Roman Reigns, Dean Ambrose, Jey Uso, each one wronged. Each one cast aside. Each one carrying scars that Rollins helped carve, and if those scars unite them, WWE won't survive the storm. In the coming weeks, pay attention. Watch the shadows. Listen to the silences. WWE is no longer about factions and promos and titles, it's about survival, because if Ambrose lights the fire, Roman might decide to let it burn, and Seth Rollins, he may finally learn what it feels like to be hunted. The biggest party of the summer. A night traditionally reserved for championship glory, shocking upsets, and career-defining moments. But this year, it wasn't about titles. It wasn't about prestige. It was about reckoning. About betrayal. About 3 men whose intertwined legacies were no longer bound by loyalty, but by scars. The Shield, once the most dominant faction in WWE history, had not just broken. It had been obliterated. And now, at SummerSlam, its 3 surviving pillars, Seth Rollins, Dean Ambrose, and Roman Reigns, stood not in unity, but in opposition. The crowd didn't cheer for one man. They didn't boo the other. They just watched. Anxious. Unblinking. As if they knew they weren't witnessing a match. They were watching a reckoning unfold, but what they didn't know was that something even darker was already in motion. It began before the main event. Roman arrived first. No entourage. No Heyman. No Usos. No music. Just a camera catching him stepping into the arena's loading dock, hood up, duffel bag slung over his shoulder. Alone. Focused. The silence around him was louder than any pop the crowd would later give. Then came Rollins. Not in one of his usual flamboyant, Messiah-like outfits. But in black. Plain black. Shield black. A deliberate provocation? Or a sign of regret? No one knew. But it made the crowd lean forward. Was it a throwback, or a warning? And finally, Ambrose. He didn't enter through the front. Or the parking lot. Or even the catering area. He emerged from under the ring midway through the Women's Championship match. A camera under the ring caught a flicker, boots. Movement. A shadow sitting still, crouched like a predator waiting for nightfall. And when the main event was finally announced, triple threat, Rollins vs. Reigns vs. Ambrose, the crowd lost it. This was no longer wrestling. This was personal. The bell rang, but before a single punch was thrown, the lights flickered again, and this time, it wasn't production error, because in that split second of darkness, a fourth figure appeared. No music. No Titantron. No warning. He stood on the ramp. Towering. Cloaked in black. Masked. The crowd didn't cheer. They didn't boo. They froze, because what they were seeing wasn't just unexpected, it was impossible. Was it Solo Sikoa? No. Was it a returning Jason Jordan? Nope. The figure stepped forward slowly, and then pulled off the mask. It was Tyler Black. Or at least, that's what the voice in the arena called him, Seth Rollins' former self. Before the suits. Before the fame. Before the shield, the man now standing at the top of the ramp looked like a manifestation of every sin Seth had tried to bury, and in that moment, the match in the ring stopped. Rollins stood frozen, eyes wide, almost recognizing his past coming back to haunt him. Ambrose smirked. Roman? He didn't flinch. He turned, and nodded, and that's when it all clicked. This wasn't a shield implosion. It was a shield ambush, and Seth Rollins was the target. Ambrose struck first. Dirty deeds. Roman followed with a thunderous spear, and the man known as Tyler Black, or whoever he was pretending to be, rushed down and delivered a brutal curb stomp on the steel steps. Seth Rollins was left unconscious. 3 men stood above him, but they weren't the shield, they were the anti-shield, the correction, the retribution. The crowd, confused and electrified, watched as the three stood side by side. But this wasn't a faction. This was a statement. Rollins built an empire on betrayal. He sold out Roman to align with the authority. He laughed as Dean walked away. He aligned with Paul Heyman after Roman collapsed. He positioned himself as the face of WWE while burning the very bridge that got him there. Now, the bridge had collapsed on him, and here's the most haunting part. No words were spoken, not one promo. Not one taunt. Not even a stare down. They left Seth Rollins broken in the center of the ring, and walked away together, no individually. In separate directions. Roman through the crowd, Ambrose up the ramp, and the masked man, backstage. SummerSlam didn't end with a celebration. It ended with a question. Who was that man in the mask? The internet erupted. Was it a rebranded NXT call-up? Was it Bo Dallas? Was it a mind game? Or was it someone entirely new? Or worse, someone we already knew, because 30 minutes after the event, a cryptic tweet surfaced from a new account, @Tyler back again. One sentence. No photo. No context. He created the shield. We just buried it. The tweet got over 2 million views in under an hour. Fans began decoding its meaning. Who is he? Seth? Vince? Heyman? The theories multiplied. Meanwhile, reports from backstage hinted that this wasn't a one-off angle. This wasn't the end, this was the beginning of a WWE storyline arc so unpredictable, so personal, and so devastating, it would run through Survivor Series, Royal Rumble, and possibly